he made it to the meeting. So yeah, he came straight from the here. Yeah, but this time it's really gone. This time, the last time was coming.
Okay, I think we're ready to go. Everybody, welcome to the April 19th, 2022 Town Council meeting. And it's nice to see everybody back in person again. We are missing one person of note tonight. Mayor Siles has a work-related conflict, so he will not be here. And I have the honor of serving as the acting mayor. And appreciate everybody's patience and your help as we sort of work through the agenda as smoothly as possible. So first on the agenda is roll call, which we don't need to do anymore since we're back in person. And I would like to start off with just 3 housekeeping items. The first would be asking for a motion to remove from the consent agenda the police department monthly report. And my understanding is Chief Achak actually is here, and he will address some of Councilmember Fouchy's questions. So is there a motion to remove the police department monthly report from the consent agenda? Thank you, Danny. And is there a second?
Well,
sorry.
I'll second it, but I also don't know whether or not, based on procedural, we need to excuse Damon ahead of that.
I'm happy to
Make a motion to
Yeah,
do that first.
that's,
Okay.
I'll move it.
Thank you. So let's start off with a motion where we will be asking that Mayor Siles, we will be considering his absence this evening as an excused absence because it's work-related. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second? Thank you, Danny. And all those in favor of the motion for an excused absence for Mayor Siles, say aye.
Aye.
All those, thank you. And all those opposed, say nay. So the ayes have it unanimously. So the next motion will be to remove the police department monthly report from the consent agenda for the reasons that I just stated. Is there a motion to do this?
I'll move.
Thank you, Danny. And is there a second?
I'll second.
Susan, can we just move the consent agenda item without that item? Either way.
I'm sorry. I was thinking that
I
this
think it
needed
works
to be
both ways,
moved
but
from
just-
the consent agenda first, but we can just, okay.
All right.
Okay. We can wait on that. Then let's jump to the third motion, which is I know that we all received from the town clerk earlier today some materials, and this would be a motion where we would amend the agenda to add a new item allowing our finance officer to basically brief us on a finance performance indicator of concern letter from the local government commission related to the late filing of our fiscal year 2021 audit.
I'll move it and ask that it be ahead of, in position G after the public hearing.
Okay, is there a second?
Yeah, I have a question. So I had said earlier that I had not had time to review this material. And now I understand that it's time sensitive. Is that what I'm hearing?
I'll let the manager speak to that.
Okay, well, why wasn't it in the board packet on Friday? What happened?
We learned late Friday that we needed to have a resolution adopted by council, so we had to prepare it for the meeting.
I haven't read it.
It's time sensitive because we need to get it into the LGC by the 26th, which is Tuesday. So we wanted to be ahead of that date to make sure it got in on.
Okay. Well, I haven't had a chance to review it.
Our finance officer is going to give a presentation to walk council through the items before you actually need to vote on it tonight.
I appreciate that, Mr. White, but I still haven't read it.
I understand.
Thank you.
With the understanding that it's time sensitive and I think council should receive Archer's presentation, I will move that we, or I guess second, Randy's motion that we put it after item G.
Okay, all those in favor of amending the agenda and adding this item to the agenda and moving it to after the public hearing. All in favor, say aye, please.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Nay.
The ayes have it 3-2. The ayes are Danny, Randy, and Susan, and the nays are Barbara and Sammy.
Just,
Yes. Mhm.
in the abstract for that, it says that they need a formal response by April 26th. That would be after our next meeting, correct?
Yes, your next meeting is on the 26th.
Oh, it is on, got it. Okay, thank you. Sorry. Got my answer.
Okay, any other comments? Okay, Fred. We'll move to the Fred Joyner, our poet laureate, who will be kicking things off with a poetry reading. And happy belated birthday, Fred.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Good evening. It's always a pleasure. I'm going to read this poem called This Is Not a Small Voice. It's by a poet who's been a mentor and a inspiration to me. Her name is Sonia Sanchez. This is not a small voice. You hear, this is a large voice coming out of these cities. This is the voice of Latanya, Khadijah, Shaniqua. This is the voice of Antoine and Daryl and Shaquille, running over waters, navigating the hallways of our schools, spilling out on the corners of our cities, and no epitaphs spill out of the river mouths. This is not a small voice, you hear? This is a large love, a passion for kissing, learning on its face. This is a love that crowns the feet with hands, that nourishes, conceives, feels the water sails, mends the children, folds them inside our history, where they toast more than the flesh, where they suck the bones out of the alphabet and spit out closed vowels. This is a love colored with iron and lace. This is a love initiated Black genius. This is not a small voice. You hear? Thank you. That's Sonia Sanchez. She's an amazing poet born in 1934. She has spent most of her adult life in Philadelphia and was one of the champions of Black studies before we had Black studies and African studies in the university system in our country. So, yeah, great American poet.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Fred.
Always great.
Yeah, I just wanted to remind everybody that all of Fred's readings, poetry readings from 2021 and into 2022, all of them are now on the website, and you can look at them at any time, and they are a real treasure. So thank you very much, Fred. Have a good evening. Okay, now I will turn everything over to Mary for announcement of upcoming meetings.
April 20th at 7 p.m. There's an Affordable Housing Advisory Commission meeting, and that's virtual. On April 21st at 7 p.m., there's an Appearance Commission meeting, and that's also virtual. On April 21st at 7:30, there's a Climate Action Team meeting, and that's virtual. April 21st at 7:30, there's a Planning Board meeting, that's a virtual meeting. Again, on April 21st at 7:30, there's a Transportation Advisory Board meeting, and that's virtual. And then we have our next Town Council meeting, which is an in-person meeting here in Town Hall on April 26th at 7 p.m.
Thank you, Mary. Council members, any other meetings that you'd like to share? Randy?
Yeah, Friday, April 22nd is Earth Day, and the Earth Day celebration. Carrboro is at Town Commons. It starts at 5, ends at 7:30. There are food vendors, environmental and climate information and education tables. There's going to be a children's parade and music and fun and games. So please join us and please celebrate Earth Day in your way and spread the energy. Thanks.
Thank you, Randy. Thanks for all your help organizing that as well. Yes, Simi.
Yeah, I was going to say, express gratitude for all your work, Randy, because I know you've been spearheading that, and it's really appreciated. I also wanted to share that on Thursday, April 21st, the Orange County Community Climate Action Committee is meeting at 3 o'clock, and that will be virtual.
Thank you, Sammy. Any other meetings? Okay. So public comment. And we'll start off, this will be for folks who are here to speak on matters that are not on the agenda. And from my list, it looks like we have Soteria and Sophie. So come right on up. Thank you for being here. Yeah. And Sophie, kind of a soft 3 minutes, please.
Okay, wonderful. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
And I'm running my timer too.
Thanks. So, it's April 19th, and we've been closed since we spoke to you last. That's 2 weeks. And I can't tell you how much work we've put in to see change. We should be having a meeting with town officials. Thank you for that. Tomorrow. And you all have the power to impact systems. People can't work this hard. People don't have the time to take 2 weeks off. Put that one in it, some air quotes. So I challenge you to shift the systems, to make them more accessible, to find ways to meet people where they actually are and bring solutions to the table. The people impacted can't be the ones who have to know what you can do. We can't know that. We're not in those roles, in those positions. Help us know. Help us know how you can help us. One thing that I would be very curious about is how you can decenter white social norms in these systems, in the ways that people can approach these systems, in the way that the police, in the way that police oversight happens. Issues of bias, issues of provocation that go unnoticed. We've had people trespass on the property, and when we have to say to them, hey, we're closed, we look like the aggressor. And as a coffee shop, we can't be rude. We can't do that and expect people to return. So when that's seen as rude because you're ignoring every sign, and that's not noticed, that's not named, that's not brought to the fore, people, and I'm going to say white people because it's always us that do these things, aren't being held accountable and aren't seeing themselves. We've had a lot of white people asking why we're closed and why don't we open, and she's winning if you close. And let me tell you that no one is winning in this situation right now. Nothing has changed to ensure the safety of Soteria and other people of color in our space. And with the time we've had to spend to seek justice, we couldn't have worked. There's no way. It could not have happened. And that has to be named, because if this is what seeking justice looks like, it can't be done. It's unattainable for most people. For people who have to work, for people who have children, couldn't happen. How's my time? Oh, I'm done. Okay, thank you.
Thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing those comments. And Soteria, good evening.
PresentDayOnMain.com, you can get a good Karen shirt. Since we need to continue to echo this, what happened on April 3rd is not the first time a white person has come into the shop aggressive, with microaggressions, aggression, trespassing, or threatening. However, it is the first time I said enough is enough, and maybe because the person that was mostly hurt in this situation was not myself, and I've learned over and over to just swallow it and deal with it and tell myself, this is just America. I think some things need to be very clear about our decision to call. She called the police on me, too, which I don't even think I said last time. But prior to going public with this particular event, I tried to call current officers and was not called back. I'm not saying it in a bad way. I have their cell phone numbers, and I always try to make sure that somebody that I know, if we have an issue at the shop, is there to make sure they can speak to my character. I also tried to call officers in Orange County and in other districts that I would actually consider friends. But to no avail, I did not reach anyone. We also went to the police department and personally asked for the Chief ATAC, and we were told that he wasn't available. Again, this is all before that Tuesday meeting, us just trying to get clarity on what happened. What have we done? We researched best practices and policies for the police. We put together 2 task force, one that will help the town with the town and everything that's going on there, which I'm sad to say I am leery that nothing will happen, and one that will also attend to the police and what's going on. We sent the solutions to the town, and I've had alone so many meetings after I swore under oath last week that I would not have any more meetings. And I have met with police officers. I've met with the chief of police. I've met with town officials. I've just had so many meetings with staff, members of the town. I want to say very clear to all of the white people to please stop using Black people who work for the town as your spokesmen and women. And to the people that are calling, as Sophie said, stop being cowards. Show your face, and if you say it in private, please say it publicly. This is also a call to action for the good Karens who have privately been talking about Marla's character in the ways that she has shown up in space. And because she is a woman of wealth and she is white, we have been told over and over again, nothing will happen because you are Black and she is white. This is coming from legal counsel. That is another reason we decided to close. Sophie didn't tell her story about this little girl named Sophie, but basically Sophie goes and she's just acting up when the dad comes, and the dad leaves, and then the mom comes and Sophie's acting up, and then the mom leaves, and the grandmother comes and Sophie takes the grandmother's glasses and she says, I'm going to put myself in timeout because if I can't change your behavior, I have to protect myself and my family and mine. I will say some concerning things happened that Tuesday before I came here to speak, or we were on Zoom speaking with the chief of police. Chief ATAC assured me that the department was understaffed, and I probably said, well, join the club, who isn't. He also informed me his officers were tired. Me and Sophie waking up 5 a.m. to serve people coffee, tired. You talking to somebody that got slave blood. So for white people to tell me they tired, I'm sorry, I have very little empathy for that. Lastly, his assurance to me that if I, as a Black woman, had assaulted a white woman, I too would have had the luxury of being on a cell phone, talking with the officer, and her white behind would have been made to go all the way to Hillsborough to file a criminal complaint. Along with that, this mysterious internal report that the public is not given to see, and that I have requested, but you cannot get it simply because, I guess we're not worthy as the public to see it. But then you send someone who was assaulted to the magistrate office with a public report that has 3 sentences. It says, she said we were aggressive, and I said she was aggressive, which I did not. I said she assaulted someone on my property, and she was trespassing. I would also like to make a note that it is not a crime, even if she thought I was aggressive. I never, ever, ever, ever put my hands on her, and she used something to hurt someone at my business. To the white people that are saying, won't you just open? Well, what happens if a white person is upset, because a lot of them are upset that we're not open and they're not getting their lattes, and someone comes in there and they harm someone else? Officer Daniel, thank you for your time yesterday, Lieutenant Daniels. He assured me the same thing, that if I, as a black woman, had assaulted a white woman, that everything would be the same. And it disturbs me that none of the officers that we have talked to were empathetic or could even acknowledge racial bias that is here and everywhere else, and to all the sanctified Holy Ghost liberals that keep saying not in Carrboro. I'm here to tell you, here in Carrboro and everywhere else in this country, unjust things happen. For those of you who have been talking about Marla and what she has done, I urge you to send her character to the police department and to the town council. I'm also very, very hopeful that the police will take an REI training. I know you're doing GARE, but this is work that you have to continue to do. I recommend Debbie Stroman and REI. I also want you all to please stop telling black people's history and learn your own. When you see these kids shooting up schools, I have not known a black or Latinx kid to do it yet. It is young white boys. So while you are telling the history of slavery in 400 years and present, what about the history in the mind of people that think it's okay to enslave someone? The last thing I will say is, for all the work that we have continued to do, I've had family members reaching out to me, asking me to leave. They do not feel that I am protected by my town. They do not feel like I am protected by the police department. And again, I have been assured by them that if I call and that happens again, there will be nothing they can do if a person at my shop is not assaulted in front of them. And we all know everyone has, in their particular yard for the most part, a sign that says Black Lives Matter. And when I need to matter the most, I don't matter to anyone.
Satiri and Sophie, thank you both very much for being here this evening and sharing those comments. And Mr. Manager, I just want to thank you and your staff for continuing to have conversations around the incident at present day on Main. And we're all looking forward to hearing about the specific actions kind of moving forward from all this. Council members, would anyone like to make any comment?
Yeah, I just want to acknowledge receipt of the draft outline that y'all had put together. We received it as a council this morning, and I haven't had a chance to look at it, but I will, and I'm sure my colleagues will. And I'm sorry I haven't been able to. I'm just working today, but we have it. So.
I have a comment, Mayor Pro Tem Romaine. And so I'm sorry that you have to keep coming. It's exhausting. It's exhausting for me to hear. And my hope is that the meeting tomorrow will yield good, holistic results for all concerned. But yeah, it makes me tired too. So thank you.
Yes, Randy.
Yeah, so folks in our community, they know what Sophie and Soteria and present day on Main have given us in terms of expressing something of the heart and the passion of where we want to rise to. And I just want to tell you, as painful and traumatic as this has been, it's really important for us to face the courageous questions that this situation raises, and think not only about the business, but about our community and what this says about community and how we can move forth. And I know, knowing both of you, that you will make the greatest recommendations for how we can move forward and create healing in the community, because I know that's what you do. Not only heal, but love. And I just wanted to share that because I know that's the reason why Present Day on Main is so treasured, because you've poured your love and your passion and your artivism into it. So thank you for coming and facing the trauma and telling us to, face the courageous questions.
Just echoing that very quickly, it's not, you've both spoken to the fact that these are conversations that our town has been having for a long time. Racial equity, economic sustainability, these are words on the tips of our tongues. It's not easy to be the people in our community to force us to get real about those conversations, to have them faster, to move toward action. That load is heavy. I appreciate it, and we appreciate you all, and we're all hopeful for the outcome of tomorrow's conversation. And very grateful that you have forced us to, come to the quick here and get real. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Danny. Okay. No other comments. So we will move on to the next item on the agenda, and that is the consent agenda. So I'll turn it over to you, Mr. Manager.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. The first item on the consent agenda is the Fire Department monthly report. The purpose of this item is to provide the Town Council a monthly overview of calls for service. The second item is the Stormwater Utility monthly report. The purpose of this item is to provide the monthly update regarding stormwater utility projects and initiatives. The next item is the Economic Development report. And the purpose of this item is to provide a monthly report of the economic development activities. I think you're going to pull the police report, I believe, is that the police report that's here. The purpose of that item on this agenda is to provide a monthly report from the police department to provide an overview of calls of service for the month of March. And then the next item would be a request to adopt a resolution to award a service sidearm to the retiring police officer. Police Officer Doug Kohler will retire from the town of Carrboro Police Department on May 1st, 2022, after approximately 6 years of service with the town and 31.5 years of total law enforcement service. The police department would like to award Officer Kohler his service sidearm to recognize his dedication to duty and his service to the town of Carrboro. The town council requests to adopt the resolution by town staff's recommendation to award the service sidearm to Officer Doug Kohler. The next item is the FY 2021-22 third quarter budget status report. The purpose of this item is to provide a budget status report to the town council for all funds. The next item is the resolution to award the COVID mitigation business grants. As recommended by the COVID Grant Review Committee. That's everything on the consent agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. So we will be polling the police department monthly report for comments. So we'll have an opportunity to hear from Chief Atack. Council members, would you like to pull any other items from the consent agenda?
I'll move the agenda, the consent agenda,
Okay.
except for that item.
Okay.
I had a question.
Yes.
Quick question on economic development.
Okay, before we get to your question, let's go ahead and vote.
Second, if you need it.
You'll second.
Did Randy need to pull? Because that's a friendly amendment. I'm willing to move the consent agenda minus the economic development report and the police report.
Your question was on the economic development report?
Yeah, I just have a quickie.
Okay.
All right. John, I had a quick question. Just if you could tell us with the what is the communication plan? What is the communication plan for the 203 project parking to the not only to the businesses but to the town folk? Because I know that right now the East Main traffic changes have been kind of, folks feel like they're behind in knowing. So I just want to know about the communication plan.
Sure. So right now, we are planning on putting them on the main navigation apps, so things like Google Maps, Apple Maps, Waze. We're also working with Public Works to add additional signage, so they'll be very similar to our existing signage for our public lots as well. There's going to have to be some improvements to the lots, and so once those improvements, of course, are finalized, we'll be communicating that to downtown businesses. We've already encouraged businesses to utilize the lot or start utilizing the lot behind the Art Center for employees, for downtown employees. So we'll be continuing that messaging as well. I had a conversation today actually with Kat Lazorko about putting together both a page covering 203 as well as a map that we can put on our website and out on social media as well. So.
Great, thank you.
Well, I have one follow-up question. So I know that we've had kind of a no net loss on parking as a sort of a pledge. And do you feel pretty confident at this point that when we have groundbreaking in May, that we'll be able to kind of keep that pledge?
Yes, we've actually got the draft of a lease, the final lease with the Fitch Lumber Company back after their attorney has reviewed it. So I've actually just sent that over to Nick today. So plan is to get those comments incorporated and get that to before council next week.
Great, thank you.
Mhm.
And Sammy?
Yeah, I mean, we have a parking study coming up, correct, next
Yes.
month, and it seems like it would make a lot of sense to to understand what that says, because we're talking about no net loss, but we're potentially also talking about a lot of empty spaces already in town, and to commit to these leases when we have a study we're about to look at doesn't make sense to me. Like, it makes a lot of sense to look at what that study says in terms of parking and then commit to these leases. So I would be for not going ahead with those leases until we have actually had the presentation on the parking.
Mr. Manager, my understanding is the parking study will come before council at next week's meeting, the April 26th, or John, do I have that
It'll
right?
be timely.
That's the plan right now, yes.
Okay.
Okay, great.
I would like to move, that we pull this from the consent agenda and finalize it next week. If we need to, if the receipt of this report is contingent on the approval of these plans, I think we should be voting on it next week. If we can hear the parking plan next week and receive this report this month, I'm happy to continue to move this agenda.
It seems like those are individual, like we would be asked to approve of them independent of the report we're considering right now. So I would be comfortable with
Okay, cool.
approving this report, and this has been an opportunity to give ourselves a heads up, like this is something we're interested in further thinking about. That's okay with you?
It's perfectly cool. Yeah. If everybody's good with coming.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay, so just to be clear, we'll be voting on the, Sammy, you have a motion for the voting on the consent agenda minus the item on the police report. And did we have a second?
Second.
Second from Danny? All those in favor of approving the consent agenda, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say nay. Okay, unanimous support for approving the consent agenda. And so now we will hear from Chief Atack about the police monthly report, as well as, I know you're going to respond to a few questions from Councilmember Fouché. Good evening, Chief Atack. Nice
The
to see you.
responses are for all of us.
For all of us.
I was going to say good evening. It's nice to see everyone in person.
Nice
Good
to see you.
evening.
I'm very much enjoying that. It's kind of weird, but it's just odd to be all here, but I love it. It's nice. Let me just find briefly my Okay. I don't know who alphabetized that, but it was not me. It may have been. Okay, so good evening. Initially here for the monthly report, we've kind of changed it a little bit, added some things to it, and tried to make it a little more informative, pass on some information that we think would be useful to kind of getting an idea of what we do. But also had some questions from Councilmember Fouché, so I'm just going to very quickly go through just the monthly report, kind of some of the metrics on it, and then address some of the questions that were raised. So here we go, just have a monthly report, just recruiting and retention questions that came up, also questions about diversification of staff, as well as professional development and education for staff. So here's our monthly report. So we had 1,300 calls, just over 1,300 calls for service for the month. That was a little bit down from the previous year by about 100, but they fluctuate, depends on what's going on that month. Traffic stops, we had just under 100, about 50-50 split between citations and warnings. And there was a question before about generally you'll see more citations for more serious offenses, more warnings for less serious offenses in general. And then for arrests with traffic stops are usually going to be DWIs. They also may have been like a warrant. Someone had a warrant or something when the officer ran their information. 23 on view or custodial, that's where we take someone into custody. We did have a domestic violence incident. I'll talk about that in a little bit. It was a kidnapping and a first-degree burglary case. But also we had charges for felony drug possession, assault on a female, simple assault, DWIs, driving while impaired, and then CCWs, carrying concealed weapon. So that would be, all those are misdemeanor charges other than the kidnapping and the felony drug possession. We had 236 incident reports filed. That's where an officer actually files a report in our records management system. We had 33 crashes. One was a fatality. I think it's still under investigation. I don't think it was a result of the crash. I think something precipitated it, a medical event or something, but I don't know for sure. But calls by area. Area 3, which is our, mainly if you start on 54 at Old Fayetteville and sort of swing south back towards South Greensboro Street, is our Area 3. That's usually the most busy because you have a density of population, and that usually runs the bulk of our calls, in this case about 44%. Items of significance, this was something added in the last couple of months just to kind of talk about stuff that happens over the month. So we had 4 involuntary commitment orders. Those are when a judicial official determines that someone needs to be taken for mental evaluation. And then we had 7 voluntary transports. That's where somebody would call us and say, I'm having some issues, can you help me? And we would provide a ride to them for, usually it's to UNC Hospital, so they can get the assistance they need. March 19th, we had the shooting on Highway 54. That was one car was shooting at another one. That is still under investigation. That was actually captured on someone's dash cam going in the opposite direction. But we're still trying to figure that one out. And then on March 22nd, we had a domestic violence incident at some apartments off of Smith Level. So we had a subject armed with 2 handguns. Started in Chatham County with some gunfire. Ended up here in Carrboro where he broke into someone's apartment that he had a domestic relationship with, held them hostage, and then assaulted them, etc. And that's where these charges came. So pretty serious charges. He was already out on bail already for a felony domestic violence assault, and then he's been charged again. So that was kind of our overview for the month. Any questions on the overview? Okay.
Yeah,
Yes,
Chief,
sir.
just a question. How many areas are there? I've seen the map. I can't remember.
Thank you. There are 4. So, and I won't hold this up and try to point to it badly, but
Yeah.
Area 1 is generally like the downtown area, right? So it'll run from basically Estes Drive if you swing down through Main Street and back towards South Greensboro Street. Area 3 swings from about South Greensboro Street all the way back to 54 near Old Fayetteville.
Mm-hmm.
Carrboro Plaza is in Area 2, so that's kind of the line right there. Area 2 swings back all the way to Estes, that encompasses that area. And then Area 4 is kind of the upper areas that stand alone, the outpost, where you're out there in the wilds.
I ask because, 44 is almost half of all the calls. I'm not sure to what extent calls represent the burden on the police department. But if it is representative of burden, then the question is maybe there should be more police dedicated to Area 3 and not in the other areas. And I understand also that there's the reality of space. So that's a challenge, but wondering if there are any other challenges beyond space.
So Area 3 is probably going to have the highest population density because it's mostly going to be a lot of rental units, 3-story rental units. So that's going to be, when I started here in 1999, Area 3 was the hop-in area. So you just tend to stay busy, and it's not bad or good. I think it's just more representative of the density of population. We do tend to have sometimes more domestics in that area, just because of a variety of factors, rental housing, et cetera, other factors in life that may cause more friction for things to rise to the surface than in other areas. But it's consistent since I've been here that Area 3. Area 1, which is the downtown area, used to be very hopping, but it's sort of calmed down in the last maybe 10 years.
I'm wondering, given that change, maybe even more impetus to reconsider the areas in terms of where the burden is and maybe consolidate one. And
So we split off Area 4 when the town expanded in 2008, 2006. I can't remember whenever the northern area was taken into. And we do have it divided up as 4 areas, but we actually generally don't have 4 people to be in those areas. So it's more of like stay nearby. Bigger agencies that have bigger footprints they'll have their system and they'll have GPS in the cars, and the system will say what car is closest to that call and dispatch that. We're so small with just 6.5 square miles that it's basically, we have 3 officers working, it's whoever is working is
or
gonna-
all areas.
Correct.
Oh, okay, because at one point I thought there was a division of labor
Yes.
with
So-
these areas.
So when the shift is full, you would have 1 in each of the 4 areas, a sergeant and a lieutenant. But where you have shifts that are not full,
Okay, and that's because of the staffing.
correct. So you just have to remain flexible.
Got it.
And just
Okay.
sort of kind of locate yourself and be in the area, but also be flexible in terms of both staffing, like this is your area,
Yeah.
and response.
Okay, good, great. Thanks for that.
Any other questions? Thank you. Okay, so recruitment, retention, and diversification of staff. Obviously a big issue for us, and I think the town's looking at this as well. So just January, we had the pay adjustment for the police department because we've had staffing issues consistently for a number of years. We have a pay and compensation study townwide that's ongoing, which if I did the math right is mid-July, I think is roughly when the time, I don't know, but that was where I did the math. I don't know if that's going to be what happens or not, but we're looking at that. So that's a townwide process, kind of just looking at the overall market conditions, the regional market, et cetera, for jobs and such. We also, Mr. Manager asked me to put together a recruitment and retention plan. I looked at him dumbfounded initially because we've never had one, but then I did my research and we found one. We've got one in draft form, and so currently it's in draft form, and I'm having my folks review it. But we've got 4 goals, 3 objectives, and then 10 action points at this point. So the 4 goals are going to be basically to increase the applicant pool in general, but also more specifically women, minorities, and other folks that are not traditionally overrepresented in law enforcement. I have it right here. Okay. Identify and utilize more avenues for recruitment, both traditional and non-traditional. Build a competitive salary and compensation package, and improve officer retention rates. So that's under our goals. Objective: increase minority and female applicant pool, increase the numbers of minority and female officers, as well as increase officer retention rates. And then we have 10 action points off of that. And again, this is in draft form, so this is still under development. Plan of action: explore adding job vacancy announcements to the following websites. So we've looked at the National Association of Blacks in Law Enforcement, Native American Law Enforcement Association, Asian American, Hispanic American, because we have some reach out there, we have some footprint in the virtual universe, but the question is, could we do more? Could we attract more people here? Could they be like, hey, I've never heard of Carrboro? That's how it worked for me. I opened the newspaper and I saw Carrboro was hiring, and a newspaper, and everyone thinks about that. But I was like, where's Carrboro? I've never heard of it, and there it was. So here I am. So if we can increase our reach, I think just getting the word out is an option. We're talking about increasing our physical presence at recruitment events. There's actually one tomorrow at the old Walmart with Orange County that we'll be out there. And I'm actually planning to be there in the morning. I heard they have donuts. Create and continue to build relationships with community groups organized around minority and underrepresented groups. Evaluate pay and compensation, evaluate job description and evaluation criteria to make sure the process focuses on applicants' abilities and qualifications, right? So we have always taken a longer look at folks because we realize sometimes what makes a good officer in Carrboro may be not somebody who makes a good officer in another agency. And I'll use myself as an example. I'm not holding myself up as a good officer, so I'm not asking for that. But I did apply with a lot of agencies, and then Carrboro picked me up. And so I really felt I found a home. After a long journey. So I'm hoping, for us that increasing that reach that we can find folks that can do the work here. Evaluate our websites and other stuff. So this is kind of what we're looking at from a formalized plan to kind of assess what we're doing, how we can do it better, how we can increase our reach. So recruitment efforts, I mentioned job fairs, there's one tomorrow. Online presence, so we have some online presence, but are we messaging consistently? So that's another issue. Are we when working with Kat Lazorko, and she's a ninja when it comes to social media, and so are we consistently messaging? Are we saying, hey, are you looking for a job? You know, we've got some jobs here. We got some good folks. Come work with us. Triangle J, we're working with the Regional Council of Governments for a regional recruitment effort that started about 2 years ago when there was a recognition that there was kind of a regional issue for recruitment. And then we're exploring other ideas, recruitment videos. You know, we have an all-female K-9 team. You know, I don't think that's kind of interesting stuff. We don't generally toot our own horn, but there's a lot of interesting stuff going on here at the police department. So I think we're talking about that, and not a traditional recruitment one, but one that fits what we do here in Carrboro and how we work. And then I wrote this letter. So when I was promoted into this position last year, I wrote this letter because it's been interesting being in law enforcement through the last couple of years. And so this was my letter as the chief of police to criminal justice professionals and educators throughout the state. And so basically deans of criminal justice schools. So right now we're developing a list of schools in the state to send this to, and it's just basically saying, look, we need good people. There's a lot of good work that needs to be done here. And it's a challenge, but we're struggling. And so it's just another way we can reach out and say, hey, you know, this is an opportunity. Now, I don't want to bore you with the letter, but it is my attempt to discuss the reality of where we are, how we got where we are, and what I see as the future, and how we can improve the profession and move forward and strengthen everything. So that's kind of my assessment of that. I'm sorry, were there any questions on the recruitment? Yes, sir.
I would just be really curious if it were the kind of thing that you thought that you could adapt for public eyes. It sounds like you have consolidated some thoughts on the profession and your
Yes.
perspective, and if you were in a position within the next couple of weeks to share that letter, I think we would appreciate it.
Okay. Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And I've been sitting on it trying to figure out what to do with it because it encompassed my thoughts as chief of police and a police officer and where we are as a profession and what we need to do to move forward. So, yeah, thank you.
Those sound like valuable thoughts.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I'll second that. I was wanting to ask the same question, but I also wanted to respect I couldn't tell if you're offering it maybe or not, but you took the bait.
So I promise I will put it out there. Let me get someone else to get eyes on it.
Okay.
But it is an appeal we're in the mess we're in for a variety of reasons. We want to see a way through. We want to strengthen the profession. We want to work with the community. We want to do the right thing when we can do the right thing. And it's basically that. So,
Cool. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks for thinking about that and
Yeah.
given the context and history we're in right now.
yeah, I mean, Any other questions?
Chief, two quick questions. The pay adjustment. So it's been, 4 months now. Are you seeing any increase in applicants as a result of that? And any increase in applicants of color?
I want to tell you, last week, we got 2 applications on one day.
Ooh.
And we talk about it still. So it was very exciting. So yes, I would say applications trickle in. In terms of applicants of color, in the last couple of months, no. We had a couple that we had in January, but we have not seen that. And that's one of the concerns, right? That's one of my biggest concerns. When I got here, my first boss was Rodney Taylor, a black man who grew up in Carrboro, knew everybody. His dad, Prince Taylor's, you know, and Rodney was a coach, and he was just, you know, so I learned law enforcement from Rodney Taylor. I learned from Cornell Lamb. I learned how to do this job correctly, right? How to do it with a balance and empathy and a reality to it. And without those voices and that diversity in our profession, we miss that perspective. And we miss that. And the town has been changing over the years, and the police department has less diversification than it had when I started. And it's a challenge, right? We've had a lot of folks come through and go other places, and that breaks my heart because these are good folks. You know, they can do good work here, but they don't stay. So that's been the challenge, one of the challenges for us. But thank you. I'd be happy to pull data on applications that we get. I just don't have it off the top of my head.
A follow-up question, how many vacancies are there in the police department?
But we
right
still
now?
have 9. So we have one retiring May 1st, that's Officer Keeler. I have another one who's retiring July 1st. Now, what I'm hoping, we've got one starting April 25th, and then I'm hoping to have another one to replace that. So I'm hoping to tread water and stay at 9 short. So that's my hope through July 1st.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
And so, because you're that short staffed, so you talked about the shifts and not being able to cover the shifts, and maybe not even have enough officers to go to court. That's probably something that you may have experienced as well for cases. And so, what I guess the level of service can and does change, and your response time and things of that nature, depending on who's on shift and who isn't, and that you work sometimes. I think I heard you say that you fill in. So 9 down, anything in the pike. I heard you mention applications. Anything promising? I mean, or do you see this like going on for an extended period of time potentially? And so there's just a lot to cover, it seems, with 9 positions out of a total of, if you're fully staffed,
39.
39. So you're working with 30 officers currently, including yourself.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, that's pretty short.
So this is not unique to us. This is nationwide. This is statewide. I mean, the amount of applicants to go to the basic law enforcement training statewide has dropped precipitously in the last couple of years. So the applicant pool within the state to be certified as an officer has dropped. So, this is not us, but we are experiencing it as well. Back in 2001, we were 9 short. Julia Lewis, if you remember her from Channel 5, rode with me, and that was my first media exposure, and I tried not to crash the car with a reporter in the car with me. But we've had this before, right? What I'm hoping to do, my biggest focus is keeping my folks focused on doing the job and doing it well, right? That's what I want to do, right? I want them to feel loved and supported and, have the resources they need. Now, we have tried to split our shortage up across patrol, across investigations, across community services. We're trying to make it so that everyone bleeds a little, so that we can still maintain that. And we have good folks here. They're working hard. They're trying hard. Their hearts are in it. But yes, this is a long-term issue for staffing for us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, Randy.
Are you finished with your slides?
I
Why don't you finish and then I'll ask my question.
Okay.
Thanks.
So the next one just talks about professional development education for staffing. So I'm just going to briefly cover just some of this. This doesn't exhaustively cover it, but every year we have mandated in-service training, an acronym because it's from the state, MIST. That's state required. So these are some of the topic areas of the last couple of years that that our officers have gone through. Then we have town required. The town is taking on more of these bloodborne pathogens, bullying. We went through the North Carolina League of Municipalities risk management review a couple years ago, and so a lot of that was already in our in-service annual training for folks. But I think the town has picked it up through for all employees for some of that stuff. So there's town required. Then we have department provided and required, the Firearms Training Simulator, or FATS, because we need an acronym too. That's basically trains officers on de-escalation and communication, proper use of force decision-making, communication, etc. So critical skills in critical incidents that we need our folks to be able to function in those moments. And then fair and impartial policing, right? That's the Lori Friedell's stuff. So the whole concept, again, it goes into that bias-free policing that we've been kind of learning about for the last several years, probably 5 or 6 years. That's usually on a biannual basis. Some of the challenges are turnover in personnel, but that is something that we provide. And then we have external providers, community colleges, and our pay options. They're also vendors that provide this. Another acronym, I didn't want to spell this one out. It's the FBI's Law Enforcement Executive Development Association. So they provide some very good supervisor management training for officers, real-world scenarios, real-world considerations for managing folks and people, and all of that. We have crisis intervention training. That's a big one for us because that trains the officers to deal interact successfully with folks who are in crisis for a variety of reasons, be that substance abuse, mental health, or any other the coexisting kind of stressors in life. And then various leadership trainings, right? Some in an online format, some in a physical format. So that's kind of just an overview. That's not exhaustive, but that's some of the developmental and educational options for our staff. And then that would be the end of it. So.
Yeah, I have one question, Mayor Pro Tem Romaine. So Chief Atec, now I know that officers have to follow the letter of the law, and you've been here long enough. I mean, you know your officers, you're the chief. And so do you feel like your officers go into situations mainly following the letter of the law, or because they go to so many varied calls, you know, with different people? Or do you feel like they're well equipped enough to meet people in situations in real time where the people are? I mean, you know what I'm saying? The letter of the law is always there because that's like what you go by. But like I said, each situation is unique. It's different. You're dealing with different types of people, and what works for Sally over here may not work for Jane over here, right? And somebody, I mean, you know what I mean? And so all the training, it looks like you're doing a lot of training. And I asked the question, do you think there's more training? Do you think there's a gap, you know, in training anywhere?
So and I took this slide out because I didn't want to take up your evening, but one of the things, and with the last 2 years of COVID, so basically we've been telling officers, stay away from the public, they're dirty, right? Get away from them, right? And now we're like, okay, the world's opening up. We need to park our cars, we need to get out, we need to interact and talk with people. So one of the things we're actually putting together right now is what I call customer service training. Mm-hmm. So the fundamentals of human exchange of information and communication can be done well or can be done poorly. Right? And so in my experience in this position and all my other positions, a lot of the issues that you have in interpersonal interaction is not necessarily the fundamental issue, but it's the way it's communicated, the way we're communicating. And so one of the things we're focusing and actually building this into is when we go to a call, yes, the law applies. Mm-hmm. Yes, the policy applies. And yes, we should provide everyone the same service and the same counsel and the same option. However, we also need to be empathetic and sensitive to how we deliver that information. And that's by responding to the person that's in front of us. So we need to be present. We don't need to be hurried. We need to check for understanding, right? Ma'am, do you know why this is what I'm saying? Are we asking those questions? And what I'm in my experience finding is that if we just ask some confirming questions, if we check for assumptions to make sure that what we're sending is being received, and work on those, what I call customer service skills, I think most of the situations where we find there's an issue, that's going to alleviate that because the officer's approaching it from, how can I provide the best service to this person? And how can I make sure they understand their options and I can say it in a way, still with the law is still the law, the policy is still the policy, but they're getting the message like this officer took their time to explain it to me so I understood it because I may not know that this is allowed or this isn't allowed. And I think that's critical because that's an educational perspective, it's a sharing perspective, and it's a communication perspective, which is our responsibility as folks who are there to resolve the issue or be a resource to resolve the issue. So that's something we're looking at, right? We're looking at non-traditional kind of outreach. I've got a whole bunch of ideas in my head that I'm trying to put down on paper now that the world's opening up again. So we're getting out of our car, we're getting back to foot patrol, right? We're going to try to get our bikes out. We're going to try to go to the pump track. We're going to try to we're out there interacting in the community. I was out at Rena last week. You know, I'm out there talking to people in 3D, and we're building these relationships in person again, which has really suffered for 2 years. And my new crop of officers has started law enforcement in this COVID. So they're not used to that. So we're constantly trying to move forward. But it is a process, right? It takes years for an officer to season and to get that myriad of experience. And then, you know, the challenge and the heartbreak for me is when people leave after a year or two, right? Because that's 2 years of molding that person, and then all the benefits and all that training goes somewhere else.
Well, I just want to thank you for being here. I think it is beneficial for us as a council, as well as the public, to see our chief of police periodically. This is not, you're doing great, right?
you.
And so this is not to put you on the spot or anything, but it's just so we can hear from you, about what's going on in the department, which you're able to share, just like you did here tonight. So I really appreciate you coming in, and I thank you in advance for what I know you're going to do.
Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara, for
Right,
those
sorry,
comments.
sorry.
Yes. Other comments? Randy?
We're fogging up. Uh, Yeah, thank you, Barbara, for that. So, yeah, it is good that you come and you're sharing on a routine, on a routine basis. I think that's very helpful. My question really has to do with the fact that since 2014, the Board of Aldermen now, the council has been looking at a more community-minded and informed law enforcement and public safety. And the last 2 years since 2018, Sammy Damon and I worked on crafting language for the Community Safety and Law Enforcement Task Force, which now is met, I don't know, a few times. Barbara and Sammy and Damon are on that task force, and I thank you for doing that work. One of the underpinnings of the task force is to look at the developing approaches that are beyond policing, and from what you just said, you're looking towards non-traditional outreach. It's really hard to, enact policy and create a task force and be doing tomorrow's work yesterday and today. But given that, or I shouldn't say but, and given that, how are what's happening with the department now and during the quarantine and the pandemic, is it being informed by the way we've laid out policy, and how is that evolving, and how is it transitioning? Because we have to realize this is a real transitionary time, locally, nationally, just in terms of the concept of what is law enforcement, well-being of community, and then what's policing.
So I've said two things to that. Number one, and wasn't going to cover it tonight, but I brought it with me. So April 6th, we have a new policy. It's chapter 43, because we keep going up in numbers. It's suspicious activity response. And what it is it lays out the parameters of how an officer can focus on the behavior of individuals. They can address implicit bias in public. They can make sure that they're making decisions based upon the facts of the circumstance, not based upon any implicit or explicit bias from the public or anything like that. It's on our website. It's basically, it came to me from another agency. I read it and I was like, yes. Because one of the things I've been trying to do is codify good police work, right? So how do you codify a culture, right? And so that's what I'm trying to figure out. And so when this came to me, it fit in that mindset. And I was like, yes, this is the policy we need. So that's an example. The other one, and I'll give you a slice from my letter. This is my letter that I wrote, but to speak directly to yours, Ms. Haven O'Donnell. Our nation's racial history and our simplistic approaches to societal and criminal justice problems have created a tinderbox ready to ignite at the next flash. I'm hopeful that with the right focus, attention, resourcing, and balance of reality and idealism, we can change the criminal justice system to be more holistic, less punitive overall, and more focused on the entirety of an issue. So that is good problem solving. That's always been good problem solving. And I'm glad it's at the forefront of conversations here, because they've said for years you can't ever arrest your way out of a problem, right? Still people try. But the reality is there's behavior, and then there's what manifests that behavior, what causes that. Well, if we're never dealing with this, the rest of this, right, what causes one human to do one thing and what causes another to do another, and we're just sitting here at the surface. Now, law enforcement has a responsibility for the surface behavior and to try to work through that. But that's a multi-resource approach to problem solving. So that dovetails 100% with the philosophy that makes good sense.
And I had one more question, and this is for, this mask is driving me crazy. And it has to do with, on the slide you mentioned the implicit bias training that officers receive. And I know that Soteria underscored the REI training in particular, which is community-based. When officers have the implicit bias training, is that part of, where it's, there were a couple things mentioned there, implicit bias, crisis response. Is that part of a police package?
So each of those listed under the mandatory in-service were a topical area, right? So a block of instruction, right? So implicit bias, right? The concept of your preconceived notions and how that can drive decision-making, absent factual reality, right? And it's the awareness of we all have it, but we need to be aware of it, so we need to focus on the reality of the situation. Again, that's where this suspicious activity response goes to, right? Both from the public's call for service, as well as in the officer decision-making and the evaluation of what they have. So it speaks directly to that. So to make a point that we are hammering that as a concept.
So, but my question is a little different based on work that Sammy, Damon, and I were doing in crafting the document. One of the things that we discovered or explored was this concept, and you've said this when you talked about community engagement, is if, and this is an if, this is, we all know I like the if, if the training is in a package that officers are only with officers and not part of something like an REI training that is more communicative, right? Then the kind of feedback that's given is very narrow. And so I'm raising this question because from the work that I've done in diversity training, one of the most important aspects is really to mix it up. And so I would underscore not only what Soteria recommended, but the thought of, yes, you need to do what's in the package, but in addition, maybe include something that's more community oriented so that community folks are engaging with officers and moving the whole goalpost forward, moving towards the goalpost with community. So I'm just...
So I went through one of the REI classes years ago. I think I'm the last remaining officer here that went through that, so I think we can explore that as an option again.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Chief. I appreciate your being here, and like Councilmember Fichy pointed out, these conversations are very important. One of the things that I really appreciate is the way you recognize this is a multi-source problem, and police work is at this top, and unfortunately, policing has been where things have been left at. It's essentially translated into the warehousing of people, and it's all a consequence of misallocation of resources to really support people's well-being. And so our challenge is to try to figure out how to change that, and it's really hard when the federal government invests towards war most of the money. But there are like these opportunities. So this current situation that you describe of being down with police and situations such as like a higher call rate for mental health, for example. I remember exactly or close to a year ago the presentation about the crisis diversion facility, and one of the things that really stood out for me was there's an ecosystem that can happen. It's not just about the facility itself, but it's also the opportunity for a mobile crisis unit that can be countywide. And I think there's an opportunity for us to think of how to stretch our resources more in terms of not doing it all in-house, in terms of hiring a mental health person for the police department, but really having the conversation with the county sheriff and our neighboring jurisdictions police department on how to pool resources, and in a way where we're really thinking and even following other, like there are models other parts of the country. And so I really want us to get a leg up on those conversations with our neighbors before we make major commitments in terms of staffing for how to address that real burden that exists because of the effects of COVID and so many other things. I think I'm not sure how we could start it, and I was hoping maybe as a one of the things that comes out of our task force, but I'm also feeling like we could be doing things in parallel. And maybe like they could be informed and talked within the task force, but simultaneously we are having these conversations and thinking with our neighboring partners, especially in light of the fact that we are trying to find ways to fill in these gaps, right? So that's an example of something I'm excited for us to look at and learn about more. But also, like you were describing earlier, your zones and how you're by the sheer nature of how your staff capacity is at this moment, not really abiding by the traditional way in which you allocated resources per zone, but rather it's more at large. Like to maybe these are those kinds of opportunities for us to reassess how to streamline things as opposed to like addressing that by hitting the number and getting back into the groove we were in before, if that makes any sense. And I'm sure you're already on that path thinking about it, but I think it's helpful to kind of name that for the community, because I think it's the kind of thing that is of this moment, in this historical moment, that we're trying to rethink of what policing looks like and recognize what it's historically been and how we can do public safety and well-being differently. Thank you.
Okay. No other comments.
Thank
Chief,
you.
thanks so much for being here. It's
Thank
a
you.
lot of
Thank
good-
you
a lot
for
of
the
good
opportunity. I
questions,
appreciate
a
it.
lot of good comments and healthy conversation.
Thanks, Chief.
Thanks again.
Mayor Pro Tem Romaine, it's not for Chief ATEC. I just had I had a comment about the Carrboro Fire and Rescue Monthly Report. I see Chief Smith back there. I do not have a question for you. I want to let you know that I read through the operations, health and safety, budget, finance. This is very useful information to have in a report, and I appreciate you letting us know how you're working to protect your firefighters. The health and safety, I mean, I was like, you don't even think about that, right? So I appreciate you lifting that up, and also on the budget and finance about how you're trying to save money, for the department, the ways you're doing that. So this report is everything. Thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks so much. I meant to mention that earlier. I mean, but it's a good, healthy report about what's happening. Carrboro Fire. Thanks.
Thank you, Barbara, for lifting that up, because I actually, when I read it, I thought the same thing. How neat is that you're making these adjustments so that these loud alarms and alerts are not so terrifying to hear those going off all the time. So it was really great to hear that you're doing that.
And just one last comment.
Yes.
I just wanted to, put it out there, Chief. I'm going to follow up with you with this idea of the Crisis Diversion Center and like help me think of how I can help with reaching out to my colleagues in other jurisdictions and whatnot. Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you all. And we're running a little behind on the agenda, so I'm going to turn this over now to Mr. Manager.
The next item is a public hearing on text
Oh,
amendments.
excuse me, Mr. Manager, sorry to interrupt. We have not yet approved the Police Department monthly report. So is there a motion to approve that report?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Sammy, seconded by Barbara. All those in favor of approving the Police Department monthly report, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say nay. And Mary, it's unanimously approved. And Mr. Manager, take it away.
Next item is a public hearing on text amendments to the land use ordinance relating to setbacks. The purpose of this agenda item is for the town council to consider a proposed amendment to the land use ordinance relating to the setback provisions for steps and associated landings. A draft ordinance has been prepared. The consideration of an amendment to the land use ordinance is a legislative decision. The council must receive public input before reaching a decision on the draft ordinance. And Tina Moon is here, our planning administrator, to present this item.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening, Tina.
Good evening.
If you don't mind, I will take this off so you can understand me, since I don't project as well as some others. Oops. Oops, let me. Here we go. Okay, good evening, everyone, council members. I have just a short presentation really to help kind of frame the discussion tonight. I'm going to try to cover some of the things that we've talked about at the advisory boards as well as your March meeting when you set the public hearing. And that includes kind of a general overall understanding of what's the purpose of setbacks. What are our existing standards? Kind of a brief recap of how we've gotten to this point. Why are you all considering a text amendment tonight? We've made some revisions to the text amendment, so I'll point those out as well. I'll try to respond to some of the follow-up questions that you've had, and just speak to some other considerations as we come to the end. So, quick review of what the purposes of setbacks are. Typically considered the dimensions measured from a building or a structure to either the right-of-way or the property line. In terms of what is the purpose of setbacks, you know, there's a lot of purposes. It's really probably began more as a light air ventilation type of a thing, as well as fire protection. Over time, we have more current, more modern needs for things such as easements for utilities. Certainly drainage is a big factor, both in terms of a place to put those facilities as well as a way to access those facilities. And I've listed a couple of other examples, and this certainly isn't an exhaustive list, but I think it gives you a sense of what types of reasons we have for maintaining and keeping setbacks as an important part of our, as an important part of our ordinance. Okay, the existing standards that we have in the ordinance, and this image I showed you the last time trying to help visualize what our particular standards say. And here in Carrboro, we take our measurement, see if I can get this, from the outermost portion of the building as it's described right here in the description. And so that measurement would occur from this red line, which would come from this little landing and step, not from the building. And this is the important, I think, thrust of the conversation tonight. So I won't go over this in great detail. This is in your packet. I think you've kind of heard how we've come to this point. This is the project in question. At the time that the building permit was ready to be, the CO was ready to be approved, there had been a change in grade. The builder had put in a set of steps. The steps were in the setback. Staff offered a couple of different options to try to make up the difference, changing the grade, perhaps setting the steps inset into the building where you see that as an option. The builder instead preferred not to do either option and appeal the way that the staff has interpreted the definition of what was applicable to the setbacks. When making a change that involves a policy change, we come to the council for those types of decisions, and that's why we're here today. What you see on the left, this is the text amendment that was brought to you before. The two changes that we have made since the request to set are shown in red font, in the red tracking. The first one it makes it a little bit more narrow in scope, that we're only talking about the property boundary lines, which is the side and the back, not the right-of-way line. And then the final sentence was just to reiterate, if for some reason, some unforeseen situation where the setback ought to be a little bit smaller, we would maintain that important fire separation. So that's why we included that extra sentence. The image on the right is intended to provide you with a little bit of a visual of what we're talking about. So here would be the full setback, and of course it's a little distorted because it's a picture, but you get a general sense of it, that 50% percentage encroachment. would be about that point. So this is the kind of thing that we're talking about.
Trish, does that, that this setback exist, Carrboro? I mean, this, yes. That looks like very small. I didn't know we had setbacks that small. Maybe in the downtown.
To be perfectly honest, I'd have to double check where I got that visual. I'm known for doing a quick Google Earth search to
be
illustrate
Winmore.
things.
Is it Winmore?
Winmore.
Yeah.
Okay.
I thought it might have been, but I wasn't 100% sure. Okay, so one of the other questions that you had as a request for staff to do a little bit of extra research was to try to see how other jurisdictions are handling this question of where do they measure setbacks. And there's a table in your packet. And as you can tell, and this is really more illustrative than going down each different jurisdiction, is that different places handle setbacks a little bit differently. Some have very general setbacks, others vary their setbacks based on the specific use. Some allow some type of encroachment based on number of feet, others do it more of a percentage. So there's really quite a variety. With regard to the question about height, the only place, and this wasn't an exhaustive search, but the place where I was finding some consideration of height relative to the setback seemed to be in very urban situations, particularly things like New York City, where they needed a fire escape, and they, in some cases, would even allow that to be over the property line. But that was the example I was really finding for that. The more recent questions, I think that you've had in the last couple of days had to do with, well, what is the requirement for fire separation? And I'm glad to see Chief Schmidt is still here in case you have a more detailed question. That's 3 feet from building to property line, and that is a state building code requirement. There is also, and the second bullet was part of your materials in the packet from that excerpt of 15-184, I think it's subsection K. For mobile homes, that separation is per the unit. It's not related to a setback for the site. So I think those are the questions that you had. You know, when we look at a text amendment, we always try to kind of think about general considerations, how kind of the weighing, what would it provide? Would it change something in kind of a good way, maybe not as good way? Some of the changes that we've tried to take into account is how to set this up such that it really fits in with the framework of the ordinance, that it's consistent in language and kind of in tone with other sections. And so I've tried to highlight a couple other sections of the ordinance which also address these types of things. So the special exceptions that provides up to a 50% setback reduction for existing buildings. We mainly see this kind of in the older section of Carrboro where folks want to add maybe an extension to the building and they want it to match, so they get that exception. There is a provision there, however, to maintain the necessary fire separation. So by adding that section, we're being more consistent in that regard. Other examples for the building setbacks, fences and berms that exceed 3 feet in height are subject to setbacks. That's why that's referenced, as well as also the ability to have some flexibility for the architecturally integrated subdivisions. So those are the reasons why we've pointed those out. Other just general considerations is in terms of the public good, public benefit, you know, what is the benefit of this potential ordinance? And I think as we're starting to see this interest in more density and in potentially having smaller lots or more narrow lots, that this may provide some folks with that second entrance, that second egress, ingress, you know, that side door that can be beneficial. And that was the way staff was trying to look at this and kind of weigh those different factors. And again, we have this, there's always a potential to add a little extra language, maybe to clarify something, to do a little bit of refinement. We put in those 2 changes that I've noted in red in an effort to try to better achieve those interests. So finally, in terms of your procedural notes, I'm not sure we have too many folks in the audience tonight, but perhaps one. The comments that we have received are in your packet. There was that one question about the Appearance Commission. They did not have a quorum at the meeting that the Planning Board considered this. This is on their agenda for this week. And since we are meeting in person, we don't have to have that additional 24-hour comment period. So you can, when you are ready, if you wish, consider the resolution for consistency as well as the ordinance. So I'll stop there, and I'm happy to answer questions.
Oh, Randy, go ahead. I can go after Randy.
Okay,
Hold on just one second. Mr. Manager, should we hear, is anybody here to speak from any public comments or questions, or should we have this gentleman speak first, or? Come right on up, please. And good evening, sir. If you could, when you have a chance, the podium would be great, and if you could state your name for us, and we're hoping you could hold your comments to a soft 3 minutes, please.
No problem. Hello, Peter Jitto. I'm just here to speak about this. This was after me and Marty spoke, and this is how we got here. But that sub picture you saw was your subdivision that you guys have, because you have an architecturally integrated subdivision. And then obviously I was looking to my people that were there, asked me to move the house to one side. And when we did that, that's how we got to this situation that we were at. And like I said, I wasn't looking for some sort of massive touch to a neighbor. This is, if you went around that subdivision and counted all the houses that are doing it, you would see that they're already doing this. It just hadn't gotten caught up to mine now. And this, the easier way, instead of making everyone rip out their porches, is to amend your guys' code to allow for having the smaller setback and allowing for a little bit of a encroachment into that setback with the smaller porches like your staff discussed. I did this, your first public meeting. I did the planning commission, and then I'm here now. So clearly I'm invested in trying to get this to come to fruition. And she mentioned the second means of ingress and egress. North Carolina Building Code does require 2 means of ingress and egress, 2 doors on every single new construction house that's built. So it is required, especially when you see more narrow lots. Thank you for your time. I appreciate you guys.
Thank you, Peter. Appreciate you being here tonight and last week as well.
Yes,
Comments? Yes.
Yeah, thanks for that clarification to the applicant and Tina for your explanation. I appreciate it. One of the things I'm interested in is how this also not just addresses the specific question or issue at hand in terms of the problem that the builder has, but also how can this augment and make our ordinances better for other purposes, and specifically for higher density, mixed use, more apartments potentially. And one of the things I can imagine, as Tina, you flagged yourself, is that side entrance can facilitate having a UDO, attached UDO built in the building, for example. But as the proposed text amendment currently reads, it is only for first floor entrances, in that it is restricted in terms of what the platform is and how many steps beyond that. And so what I'm interested in is making that read so that we could potentially have steps that go to a second floor. So we're not talking about further encroachment into the setback, because in theory, this would fall in parallel to the lot line or the setback itself. But what it would allow is for a higher stair that could go to a second floor. Because I can imagine, I've seen buildings in Carrboro with a second floor or a converted attic where people are able to make that into a dwelling. And especially in light of the potential that we are, after our comprehensive plan, going to be reassessing these ordinances, I think it would behoove us to get a leg up by getting it right with this text amendment, with that perspective in mind, not just to address the applicant's concerns, but think about what else are we trying to accomplish in our town. So for those reasons, I personally don't feel ready to, I want the applicant to be able to move ahead with what he needs to do. So perhaps it is approval of what we have tonight, but But I also want to expedite being able to have a second floor. And I don't know if that's as easy as just coming back next week with that change in language, or we have to be a little more involved in this process.
Same.
So I guess that's a question.
Oh, I'm
Come
sorry.
back on up here, Tina.
Can I ask you to talk about that second floor one more time, what you were suggesting? I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
I was just, in the interest of, one of the other purposes of allowing this kind of steps into the setbacks is to allow for access into potentially another unit. But because of the wording of this text amendment, it only allows for that extra unit to exist on the first floor, because it talks about, forget how many steps or feet
The
of
height, what is
steps.
it? Yeah.
And so you can't really fit in enough steps to get to a second floor if you
Right.
restrict it with that language. And so my interest is in changing the language so that it would allow for stairs that could go to a second floor.
Second floor, yeah. Got it. Thank
May I offer a thought? As you may know, in the comments, the planning board asked a question about ramps. And so when talking through with our building inspectors about how would that affect the dimensions, you know, the one thing that became very clear is that, you know, you could probably get a landing and a set of steps within, say, 8 feet. I think that was the way we wrote it. If you included a ramp, you're probably talking about 15 feet. If you're talking about multiple stories, you're getting probably potentially a little bit bigger, which if it's written, and where I'm going with this is if that is an interest, we may want to pause and think about how to craft that in such a way that it doesn't just essentially allow for a large deck. You know, because you're making that dimension, you're permitting that dimension to be much larger without being very careful about in what situations would you allow that. So if that's an interest, it might make sense for us to kind of think about how to put something together and come back for that piece of it.
We could
Yeah,
s-
sorry, I was looking at it might be related to the language of lots, so long as the height of the steps and associated landings are no taller than 3 feet above. I mean, that restricts it. Maybe we needed, but I see what you're getting at. I mean, taking that out would mean it could potentially be a deck, which,
Yeah.
which honestly, I don't know if I think that would be a problem either. You know, personally. Why not?
Barbara, did
Oh,
you
no,
have a
no,
comment?
You're
Ah.
okay. Yeah, you're fine.
Yes, Randy.
Yeah, well, I actually, that's what I was going to ask about initially, which is the planning board comments. I was very interested in their comments regarding the 4x4 and why not make it 5x5. 4x4 is small. And, you know, depending upon the needs of individuals, if they just, you know, they need to be on a crutch or something else. I mean, 4x4, I think it needs to be a minimum of 5x5. And that would be, and I want to stand by what planning board has recommended for the landing, and I think that's a safety factor more than anything else. Second, I think Sammy's idea is intriguing. I actually would be curious from the fire chief's view on the safety. I mean, having grown up in a metro area, and had a fire escape as my balcony for a long time. I'd be curious to know if there was something, rather than us simply thinking, well, you know, could we just add the second story, whether or not there's some fire considerations because of needing the dual entrance and exit. So before we go forward on even considering or exploring, I'm just curious if there's some other fire factors that we should know about.
Good evening, everyone. Good to see everyone in person. That particular question, it's something I'd like to take under advisement and just to kind of look at before committing one way or the other. Because, when you do think, when you look at, the state law is 3 feet, but when you think about the potential fire spread, so we were talking a little bit about the potential for a patio or something. So if someone's grilling outside, you start to look at those things. It would be something I'd like to consult the fire marshal with to come up with an official, if we want to look at above the first floor, here are some additional fire safety considerations we should consider as a town to adopt into the code. Absolutely.
Subject matter expert, there he is.
Thank you, Chief.
You're welcome.
Much appreciated.
Thanks, Chief. So I mean, it seems like there's interest in better assessing this. The question is how to proceed given the applicant and expediting this for him, and then how to proceed in terms of making this the best text amendment for our purposes in terms
Who's
of
gonna tell us
facilitating more dwelling units.
procedurally?
Are there any
I have a
suggestions?
view about that.
Sure.
The first cut view.
Yeah.
That if, to think through and come up with what you're talking about, you know what I mean, y'all, on what I call the second floor here, that would be a substantial change to what you've got here. And then so in other words, if we wrap that, it does make sense for certain efficiency purposes, into this, you know what I mean? We start the process over, have another notice, we'd have substantially different kind of ordinance.
Yeah, okay.
So you have that choice. You also have the choice that to the extent you feel that what is currently proposed, even though it's not as thorough, you could act on that, and then we're at a subsection 7 instead of a subsection, that would deal with the second issue. So that's a call that y'all. But I do want you to know we can't. We have to start the process over again. You know what I mean?
Okay, we would have to start it over anyway, and that's a substantial change.
Yes, sir.
Thanks.
Thank you, Nick. Danny?
With that expedience in mind, I do also just want to remind us that we just agreed on some language as a council to revisit this, or not to revisit, but I think we're expecting a pretty aggressive draft on these setbacks for the next version of the comprehensive plan, which I think will give us pretty wide leeway to address a lot of the density and accessibility and versatility concerns. I think, our primary interest here tonight, given what Nick just said, probably is the applicant, but that we should take this all very well to heart and take these density and versatility and accessibility concerns with us as we examine setback.
Okay.
I would support that too, Danny, in terms of making a decision on this very sort of narrow proposal before us this evening. I did have one question, Tina, in terms of Randy's comment and the planning board comment about the 5x5 versus 4x4. And would you weigh in on that? That would be the only possible change, maybe.
That was a request that's in the packet to increase the landing from 4x4 to 5x5. That probably isn't that substantial, but do you have a call on that?
Call,
Yeah, I mean, we could err on the side of safety and.
Yeah, it's a tough.
I
I don't
Leave it
know.
as is.
Might be right about that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's our call, basically.
Yeah,
What's what it sound like to me?
That's right. I mean, you can do.
That would be my friendly amendment then.
I think we should go 5x5 if it's up to us.
Yeah, I'm good with that. Yes.
I think the planning staff, I really admire them, and so they should speak up. I would not have any heartburn if you change that. You know what I mean?
Right.
Someone can argue all day long that's substantial, but I don't.
Like aging in place is primary, right?
Exactly.
But the second floor idea, that whatever that is, that's going to be.
That's got to be very different.
Okay, can I suggest that the language then also include a change to 8 feet, make that 10 feet? Because if it's
And steps no longer than 10 feet instead of 8 feet? Or
Yeah,
you're on
because-
attachment B, right?
Yeah, the actual text amendment, it says no larger than 4 feet in width by 4 feet in length. So it would be
5 by 5.
5 by 5 there, and then the combined length of landing and steps no longer than, I guess that would be actually adding one more foot, so 9
Oh,
feet.
but what you recommended, you said about 10 when you were sharing.
The example I was giving was if you were also to include the ramp would make it it was an illustrative example, that would make it quite a bit larger, perhaps too large, but
Oh, I
simply
see.
adding a foot or two. I'll look to the attorney again, but you would be
Yeah,
comfortable with that?
I have no heartburn.
Going to the 10
10.
feet.
To the 10.
Okay.
5 by 5 and 10.
I'm not going higher than 9. I'm kidding.
So with these changes, do we need to have a vote of approval for the changes, or do?
Yes.
Can I,
Okay.
Mayor Pro Tem Romaine, can I ask
Mhm.
Ms. Moon a question really quick? The Appearance Commission is scheduled to weigh in, and so we need to, I guess, do whatever our part is tonight without their weigh-in, because I understand they didn't have a quorum.
I think
the
that
last
is,
time.
I think that is your choice.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted.
I appreciate you raising that. So that is a question. Are we comfortable going ahead with this vote without hearing from the Appearance Commission first?
I think for me personally, I'm in light of Mr. Jitto's observation that this in practice has happened quite a bit
It's already
in
happened.
town building. I can imagine some objections from an appearance standpoint in the abstract, but the practical fact is that we have this in some of our most attractive neighborhoods. And, I think with respect to the broader concerns that we are right to identify, I think we owe it to the applicant to move this on.
Okay. All right. With no further discussion, is there a motion to approve the ordinance with the following changes? Where it reads 4 feet in width by 4 feet in length, that will be changed to 5 feet in width by 5 feet in length. And where it reads steps no longer than 8 feet, it will now read no longer than 10 feet.
I'll move it.
So Randy moves, and Danny seconds.
You'll do the resolution, you can go ahead and do the resolution for consistency now that then you
Yes, I'm
can
gonna-
formally.
That's
yeah.
attachment A.
Yes.
We'll come back to that. All those in favor of approving the changes to the ordinance, say aye.
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 All those opposed, say nay. Okay, the ordinance is adopted. And then, Tina, we will now go on to a resolution adopting a statement explaining town council's reasons. This will be attachment A1 of A1. And so Section 1 will now read, Council has reviewed the draft amendment to the text of the land use ordinance and concludes that the proposed amendment is consistent. Section 2 will read, Town Council's action is reasonable and in the public interest for the following reasons. And we can keep those just as is. And then Section 3 will read, therefore, the Carrboro Town Council has approved the proposed amendment to the text of the Carrboro Land Use Ordinance. Everybody okay with
So moved.
that? Okay, so
Second.
moved. Is there a second? It's moved by Sammy, seconded by Danny. All those in favor of adopting the resolution, say aye.
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 All those opposed, say nay. And the resolution is adopted.
And just for
Yes.
clarification, when the language there was the proposed ordinance, proposed as amended.
Thank you, yeah.
Thank
I
you.
I just say that for the record. That's
Yes,
apparent going on.
Thank you, Nick.
for the record.
Okay. So next on the agenda will be the addition that we made. And I will turn things over to Mr. Manager.
They wait till he returns. Wait till
Thank
he
you,
returns.
Peter.
Thank you.
They wait till he returns. Then he just left the podium.
You talking about
I
Danny?
think Danny went to the bathroom.
He had the potty.
Do we proceed? Or?
I'm happy to wait a moment if you all are okay waiting a moment since we're
Fine.
pretty small
Back
tonight.
time.
Barbara.
I've had my share. I have. Right
Actually, let me see those. Can you pass?
Probably
It's
better than
dark.
what you've got.
Wesley, you're tempting me. Yeah,
I mean, you eat
Mary.
dark. You like dark? Yeah, I do. Too. Love dark.
Only dark.
Oh my God, oh my God.
We forgot to open our window this evening.
It was kind of chilly, and
Thank you, because I don't have my blanket with me.
You were out at the ball game with Braxton.
It was cold out there too. And I had the nerve to have sandals on and all that. I'm like, okay, well, it's not really time yet.
Which game was it?
Durham Bulls.
Oh.
They lost. They lost the whole series. All three of them.
y'all heard of the Savannah Bananas?
The minor league team?
Kind of a reinvention of baseball team. My friend who does documentaries is filming it for ESPN. It'll come out in August.
Savannah Banana.
I'll send you a link to their little.
Savannah, Georgia. Okay.
Cool. They allow outs to happen if someone in the crowd catches it.
Get out of here. That sounds like some Harlem Globetrotters
Yeah,
stuff.
it's basically that.
That's what it sounds.
Okay,
Okay.
we're all set.
The next item is a finance performance indicative concern letter for FY 2021 audit. The purpose of this agenda item is to brief the town council on a finance performance indicative concern letter from the Local Government Commission related to the FY 21 audit. And there's also a resolution, council is requested to adopt it. And our finance officer, Arch McAdoo, will give an overview of the item.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. Good evening, Arch.
Good evening.
Nice to see you.
A little slow, but I get there.
You take your time.
Good to see you in person.
Yes, good to see everybody again.
To see you, Art.
Arts. Yeah. Go ahead on. Finish up.
I tried seeing Arch in person the other day when I showed up at the manager's office for our Zoom call.
If you don't mind, I need to sit.
You were
Oh, of course not. Yeah,
perfectly
please.
fine.
Okay. Good evening again, Mayor Pro Tem and members of the council. I am not used to reporting negative types of things to the council when it comes to the finances. However, this matter needs to be considered by you tonight so that we can keep our 203 project financing on track for the May 3rd Local Government Commission. I received an email from the financial analyst that was working on our application who wanted to know what the status of our response to the finance performance indicator on our last audit. And boy, was I surprised. I had never heard of it. I looked at the North Carolina Administrative Code. I talked with the auditors who had not heard of it, which I was surprised. I spent several days trying to get this matter resolved informally by talking with people at the LGC and sending a letter to Mr. Jones Norris, who was our senior accountant advisor over at the LGC. And there was no way we could do it. They said they could not forgive it. They could not write that off because of the administrative code. And what happened was the audits are due December 1. which is 5 months and 1 day from the end of the fiscal year. Our audit was not filed until January 24th. We knew it was going to be late, but we didn't know it was going to be that late and stuff. And because it went beyond the December 1 date, you may recall we had to amend our audit contract for a no-cost extension of time. And we had to do that before the LGC would even consider our audit. The reason the audit was late was because in late November, the management team at the firm that was reviewing our paperwork all of a sudden realized that we had more grants that need to be accounted for. And because of that, they determined that we needed to have a single audit. A single audit is it's a little bit worse than a regular financial audit in the sense that they really have to drill down and look and see if you're in compliance with the federal rules that apply to that grant. They go out and do some testing. It's not like you can do it overnight. And so that took some time to do that. And what had happened, normally we give them the schedule of federal and state assistance in June during the preliminary visit. And between that time and the field works, when the start of field work, which starts around Labor Day, that is reviewed and corrected. That didn't happen this time. The manager that was assigned to our account abruptly left the firm just as the field work was beginning. And I believe that if that individual had not left the firm, that this would not have been an issue. The management team that reviews audits should not be identifying those types of things that late in the audit. But nevertheless, our audit was late. And according to the North Carolina Administrative Code, it's the independent auditor's responsibility to identify in their presentations and in their reports to the governing boards any financial performance indicators of concern that has been expressed by the local government commission. That did not happen this time. I will say, in talking with Susan McCullough, who's the director of the fiscal management section over in the state and local government finance division, we had a long talk. I spent a lot of time working with her yesterday, and she told me that the reason for the administrative code was that they wanted to speed up the communications on audits to the governing boards. In the past, they would send what they call unit letters explaining violations or concerns that they had. Those unit letters didn't usually reach here until, like end of March, April, May. But by moving it to the auditor's responsibilities, the audits are due in December. The presentation is supposed to take place at that point in time or soon thereafter. And so that was their way of looking to speed it up. That didn't happen in this case. So I spent, like I said, I spent a lot of time yesterday working with Susan over at the LGC. And one of the things, the administrative code requires that governing boards respond within 60 days. We couldn't respond in 60 days because we didn't know about it. Okay, and I had, before talking with Susan, I had filed a letter with the LGC trying to point out to them that this was not a negative financial performance indicator, that it shouldn't be there because of, one, the auditors never pointed out any such things, in the audit, plus the auditors never informed us of that. But they are sticklers over there, and they said, we still got to have a response from your governing board, And so we are on schedule to be on the local government commission agenda for May 3rd. for the 203 financing. And Susan said that they could delay a few days the mail out of the materials to the commission. But she said that we needed to have a response and that we needed to get that, over to them by April 26th in order to keep the agenda item on track for the May 3rd LGC meeting. I worked with her yesterday. I drafted a resolution for the board to, pass. And tomorrow, if the clerks can certify that resolution, I can get that to the LGC tomorrow, and this will be a matter that's put to rest. I must say that this is a one-time occurrence. We do not have a track record of getting, these types of performance indicators from the LGC. And so this is the first time. In the resolution that I gave you, I indicated that we acknowledge the performance indicator, we accept it, we admit that our audit was violated, and I also put in there a couple of things to prevent this from recurring again in the future. And one of the things that we're going to do is in the resolution, we say the finance officer shall review the schedule of expenditures of federal and state awards with the independent auditors prior to the start of year-end field audit work. And the independent auditors shall communicate to the finance officer any required corrections in this schedule prior to the start of the year-end audit work. There are some other things that we're considering, to prevent this from happening again. And one of them is we're looking at seeing if we can include some financial penalties in our audit contracts for when the auditor fails to meet deadlines. I'm told that other municipalities have tried that, and they wish me luck because that is hard for audit firms to do. But we're going to try. I haven't talked with John, but we'll have that conversation. And the other thing that we're looking at doing is that we will hold final payment until our financial statements have been filed or processed by the LGC. The LGC, under its policy, will authorize the payment of up to 75% of the audit contract. And the other 25% is held back until everything is done. For some reason, somehow, the LGC has to approve all invoices from the audit firms. Somehow, we got the final, the final payment, which is like 25%, and we processed it and we paid it because it had been submitted to the LGC and we knew that was, but I now know that we need to, not approve those immediately. We need to wait until the LGC actually reviews our audit. They will send us an email that says they have received the audit, and so, but they don't send us one that says we reviewed the audit and we found these performance matters of concern. That goes to the independent auditors. And so we will be holding that payment until the independent auditors can assure us that it has been accepted by the local government commission and there are no performance indicators in there. So unfortunately, that's what it is. Some things you just can't resolve informally when it comes to the North Carolina Administrative Code and general statutes and stuff. And I understand that. I respect that. And I humbly respect that you as a council adopt this resolution so that we may continue moving forward. And I'm sorry that this happened, but it was, just totally beyond our control. But I'm glad we found out about it in time.
Hmm.
Yeah. Mr. Manager, did you have anything else to add?
No, Archie did a very thorough job explaining this, so I'm good.
Yeah, Arch, I just wanted to say, I apologize to you that you have had to go through all of this. I can't imagine how stressful this has been. So I appreciate all your work in getting this straightened out. I know that with the deadlines approaching, that's added to the stress. And I also just wanted to say that in terms of preventing this from happening again, I think we really need to look at, we want to use this auditor next. I mean, it strikes me as the auditor dropped the ball
Yes, they did.
multiple times, including a presentation to council without saying that there had in fact been this letter of concern. So I just wanted to throw that out as another way to help prevent this from occurring again, to at least to consider. Okay, thank you for your comments, and Barbara, we'll begin with you.
Thank you, Mr. McAdoo. Art is an OG. He know how to handle stuff like this. Y'all know what an OG is, don't you? Catch up. Y'all catch up. He's original. He's original gangster of finance, a chief financial officer. So thank you for the overview. I did not get a chance to read it, but with your overview and just knowing who you are and how you've handled the town's finances, you're always just so professional and providing all the needed information. I am very comfortable moving forward with the resolution, and I thank you for taking the time to just really lay it out and let us know what happened. OG McAdoo, that's you.
Thank you, Barbara. I'm glad you're feeling comfortable with the resolution. Yes, Randy.
Yeah, Arch, you must have been aggravated. This must have been, I can't believe.
I can't describe that.
I'm telling you, man, I just knowing you, oh man. I'm impressed that you were not screaming and that we weren't hearing you screaming. Two
You're not
questions.
supposed to hear me screaming.
With your Garfield
Hello,
slippers
right?
on, screaming.
So I had two questions. One, is the trickiness of the grants. Is that something, it looks like you're putting in some scaffolding so that that doesn't happen again. We're a grant-happy municipality. Money's there, we're going to chase it. So I guess my question is, does this have implications for staff, for you to be able to do this, or is that totally on Dixon Hughes or the auditors?
But the staff has to do this and put this together, and we've not had, we've in the past. I know we put it together, and there have been a need to make corrections in it, and that came from the auditors on site, during the field work, and we were able to make those adjustments. But if nobody reviews that schedule until the management team at the firm begins to review it, that's not right. So the auditors did drop the ball in several instances, but I don't want to get into that because it's not germane right now. We just need to, we know what the problem is, we have a solution, and that's what the important thing is.
Yeah, I
right now.
appreciated in your letter that you enumerated the things that you were like, well, wait a minute, this is not what we agree with here. I really appreciated that. But I also, are you sensing that we should review Dixon Hughes? Or is that a question for a little later on?
That's
But that's another question.
Yeah.
For another time.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Okay.
Hard to imagine
But-
how we would not.
But I'd like to put that question in the parking lot because, we do definitely want to look. And because my sense is that, going forward, especially you look at where the federal policy is moving, hopefully with the kind of grants that are going to come forth that are more localized. It's going to, the finances, I can't imagine what they're going to look like over the next 2 years between, the ARPA funding and the infrastructure funding. So if we could put, that in the parking lot, I'd really appreciate it. And once again, I want to just come behind Barbara and say, Yeah, Arch, you're the man. I hate that you've been as aggravated as you have, but I thoroughly appreciate the not only the clarity with which you laid out how this happened and summarized it, but also that the specificity with which you understand how to move forward and remedy this from happening again. And that's why we love and trust you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Timmy?
Thanks, Arch. Sorry, other people tried to make you look bad, but they didn't succeed because we know you well. My question is, it sounds like you tried to talk them into like not making such a big deal out of it, and they pointed to a statute that says this is a big deal.
The
Is
North
that
Carolina
correct?
Administrative Code. and stuff, yeah.
So my question is this resolution gonna meet the standard of that statute?
Yes.
It will. Okay. Okay. That's it.
Be late, but it'll meet the standards of it. There's two things that they ask, and that is, why was it late? And what are you doing to prevent this from occurring again?
Okay.
And this resolution addresses both of those.
Okay. Thank you.
Good question. Thank you, Sammy and Barbara.
How long was Dixon Hughes? How long have the auditors?
How long have they been with us?
I don't know how long.
They've been here ever since they were here when I got here, so they've been here for over, how long have I been here?
I've been
12
here.
years, huh?
Were they here when you were first here?
I don't recall. It's been over 20 years ago.
I have no idea. So at least as long as you've been here and before you got here.
Yeah, they were here when I got here.
Okay,
That was
any,
just-
oh, excuse me.
No, and I was going to say, and I was assured that they were a good audit firm and that they had treated the town well.
Mhm.
They have been.
And they have kept their prices flat.
Yes.
So.
I'll move the item.
I'll second.
Okay. All those in favor of approving the resolution, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say nay. Unanimously approved, and Arch, can't thank you enough for your presentation tonight, as well as all that you do for the town. You are a gift.
Thank you.
This will take away some stress from you.
Well, stress comes with it.
You don't have those palm trees behind you anymore.
No, we can't.
Yeah.
Oh.
Oh, God. God, what a mess.
Last item on the agenda. Any other matters by council members?
I think we wanted to hear from about COVID, right?
This was,
Can we hear about COVID?
Thank you, Art.
I have a few questions about COVID. I'll start. Thanks, Arch.
but let me just mention, we're not going to have COVID on the agenda this evening. And the reason is that tomorrow there will be a whole new set of numbers that are made available.
Yeah.
So that will be late tomorrow afternoon. My understanding is the mayors and the chair of the Board of County Commissioners will all be meeting Thursday morning. And at that point, seeing where things are, and that's probably going to be a much better point to sort of reassess things. So we were not really planning to have this on the agenda this evening.
Right. So one thing, though, is that happens every week. So what you're saying today might happen, it could be said next Tuesday because they'll meet the following Wednesday and the numbers come out the day after we meet. So I don't want that to be, kind of reminds me of this storefront in Savannah I saw once. It said in permanent writing, free hot dogs tomorrow. And you showed up tomorrow and they said, yeah, they're free tomorrow, So I think it behooves us to talk about it because I don't want to be stuck in an infinite cycle. And the main thing I want to say is that it's very frustrating that we have these updated metrics that are very heavy lag dependent. In other words, hospitalization and deaths happen after infections have been pervasive within the community. And if our goal is, like it wasn't like it was not so long ago, to try to minimize the transmission as a means to minimize the new variants that happen because of transmission. One, long COVID, there are some estimates that 5 to 10% of vaccinated people who get COVID end up having long COVID. Two, the effects on the economy. Three, deaths, hospitalizations. All these things are for us to mitigate. And one of the best ways to mitigate is by wearing masks. And we just saw a federal court, strike down masks on public transportation. Fortunately, it is still seen as a problem, but I bet a couple of weeks, just like with all these other slowly eroding ways in which to mitigate this pandemic, we will be perfectly fine with there being no masks on planes. And like happened in Europe, a lot of airplanes around the time when they were spiking with BA2 got grounded and the economy suffered. So what I'm getting at is I think it is our responsibility as a council to talk about this. We have delegated this as the state allows us to our mayor. In a general sense, emergencies are delegated to the mayor to deal with. I think that the nature of this pandemic is not as fast as most emergencies, which is why I believe that at some point the Board of Aldermen delegated that to the mayor. I think it behooves us to really be thinking in terms of our responsibility to our community and the slow nature of what the pandemic is, and the responsibility and possibility of us as a council to really be the ones making decisions in terms of when to mitigate, when to implement masks and those kinds of things. So one question I have for Chief, and that's just a question for us to putting on your lap for you to be thinking about. I don't expect y'all to be warm to the idea yet, but you could surprise me. I think that, and I hope to be wrong, that this current upswing in this BA2 new variant and the transmission and the hospitalizations that will happen, hopefully will be a wake-up call. Hopefully not, because I don't want that to happen. I want y'all to be right. But let's remember, if it does end up being this upswing and there are these hospitalizations, this was the moment when we had to require masking for the community at large. I was at Easter Mass, and I was shocked to see about 5 to 10% at St. Thomas More wearing masks, sitting in church for an hour. All elder people, a lot of elder people without masks. And I think that, we signal that there is an issue when we say you have to wear masks. It's at one point someone described it as like a weather thing. You get an alert, a tornado's coming. Take shelter. Hospitalization. I heard another analogy. Hospitalizations is and deaths is like saying, don't wear seatbelts until there are people who have been hospitalized and dead. Like what? That's crazy. So one thing I wanted to ask, Chief, is, the numbers, unfortunately, the way that the reporting happens, now it's weekly. We used to have much better numbers, which is really bad because we're expecting individuals to make these decisions on their own, and yet we're not providing the appropriate information for them to do that. So I'm wondering, as we did in the past locally, are we able to acquire these better data independent of our now dependency on the CDC? I mean, we were doing that not so long ago. Can we do that? And if not, then why not?
I know the state DHHS has made the transition also to go to weekly reports. So from a health community standpoint, at least in North Carolina, the transition is made to a weekly report because of the status of where we're at with COVID and the cases. And so I will find out. I do know that Quintana talks to UNC Hospital at least once, I believe twice a week. She talks with Emily. And so even the hospital numbers we're getting, she's getting them before the report ever comes in. So if we start to see that increase, we will not rely on the CDC or DHHS. We have that direct link, or she has, I shouldn't say we. Quintana has that direct link with UNC Hospital. And so we will know if we start to see that increase.
What I'm most interested in is the wastewater data, because that's the one that shows transmission. Once it's hospital, it's that 2 to 3 week lag. It's kind of useless by then. Unfortunately, the North Carolina Department of Human Health Services website, current last data point on wastewater for OWASA is of 2 weeks ago. So it's essentially that lag. And so my question to you is, do we have better data? Can we talk to OWASA about like just having a better update?
We can talk to OWASA. If I'm not mistaken, and I'll double check with Quintana, I've got my call with her on Thursday. There's still she gets a weekly wastewater report. I believe it's either Tuesday or Wednesday morning, but she has started sending me those.
Okay.
So it is, I was under the impression that everything was being updated, so it's really not a big deal to then turn around and push that out.
That would be great, especially if it's on Tuesday, so we'll have a chance to respond to it, because that's the other lag. We get, Wednesday, and then there's a whole week of waiting.
Absolutely.
And what's the point of that? And then lastly, this last report, we just received it, but it was like a week ago or a week ago. If there's any way in which we could get that a little, like I'm trying to minimize all the lags that exist, because our responsive rate is not going to be so quick. And obviously, like, it's upon the mayor because we've delegated that. But I think it's still our responsibility to be attuned to what the mayor is doing and let him know, like, whether we agree or not on those actions.
I know the partner information report, that was a couple weeks late. They had a couple employees out. One was in school. I think it was last week. I just forwarded you what Quintana used for the board of Orange County.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, typically it comes out within a day or so after we meet. And I believe our next scheduled meeting is early May. I believe it's May, the second Tuesday in May, where we're going to revisit everything too.
Okay.
So it's typically as soon as I get those, I turn around and I push those out.
Thank you, Chief.
Absolutely.
And one of the things that it really stands out to me is you look at the transmission map in North Carolina, whereas we used to not be one of the hot spots early on, now we are because we don't have masks. It was the masks that made us be lagging in that regard. And I think we need to take that into account and really, it's not such a big ask. Our community is not so burdened by masks. And this is for the council. So again, this is the kind of conversation I think it behooves us to have, not just to make the right decision, but so our community knows that they can see this in a public meeting. We're having this conversation and they can provide feedback to us. And I know there's a hesitancy to move ahead without all our other partners, but honestly, what we need nowadays is leadership, and we're the nimble small community that has historically been playing that role. And I think we need to step back into those shoes and not be slowed down by really going by what these higher scales of government are really setting the tone on. And I think they are failing. I mean, we're still having a lot of people that are dying because of COVID. The second largest cause of death is COVID after heart disease still.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for your patience and hearing me out. And I hope we can have a good conversation about some changes.
Thank you, Sammy. I will say, Chief Schmidt, the number that stood out to me in the report was the 50%. Only half the people in Orange County have been boosted, which surprised me. So in terms of the messaging, that may be an important message to be getting out, is people have been vaccinated, but they haven't been boosted. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. Good for all of us to be doing as well. Final comment, Randy.
Yeah, I've been sitting here trying to remember. I want to say it was back in December, we were on the Zoom, and I had asked that we have a report from OWASA that they come and present about the wastewater and what the numbers look like and how they continue to monitor it. And I still would like to see that now more than ever. Chief, you all are meeting tomorrow, correct? Thursday, okay, all right. Yeah, I'm concerned, just because with, the change in, the federal policy on transit, I'm just thinking 2 weeks out, we're gonna see all kinds of spiking. So I'd like us to be real thoughtful by next week to be able to make a decision. I understand not being able to push for that tonight, but certainly as we see that major airlines are making they changed their policy as of today. I'd rather not wait the next 3 weeks to see the spike if we have any indicators, and I think wastewater is one of them. I'll also just say that, the BA2 seems to be transmitting so much faster that folks who have been vigilant for the last 2.5 years are now COVID positive. So, thank you.
And just one question, because in the summary of the April 8th meeting, it says an additional partner information sharing meeting will be scheduled for May, but you were referring to one that's happening tomorrow. So I need a little clarification in terms of which one is accurate, or are they both? So is there a meeting tomorrow?
There's a meeting, there will be the weekly numbers will be updated. The meeting is not until Thursday morning, and that will be with the mayors and the chair of the Board of County Commissioners.
It's not COVID specific, it's just.
It will be around COVID.
Oh, will, okay.
Mhm.
Okay, good.
It will be
And that's
reviewing those
different from the
numbers.
partner meeting.
That's different from the partner meeting.
That's a much larger group.
The partner meeting is larger, okay. May 10th, okay. Hmm? Yeah, I mean, there's a big lag in all this information, and it's very concerning to me. I mean, the thing is like, we know this is going to happen because it's happening everywhere else. I don't know why we think we're exceptional. It's crazy. Okay, this is my 2 cents.
Thank you all. If there's no further comment, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Andy, and second from Sammy. All those in favor?
Aye.
Say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed. Thank you all very much.
Stay healthy, y'all.
Stay healthy.